Today, what's going on in the South Island? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian and New Zealand flavour. And today, I'm joined by Paul Johnston. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Martin.
Thanks for spending some time with us. And Paul, I'm really interested to talk to you because you are a resident of the South Island of New Zealand, and you've been in the property game for quite a long time.
Yes.
So I think it'll be really interesting to get a bit of perspective from you in terms of what's going on down there, because of course all the focus in New Zealand has been about the Auckland property market.
Yes.
But that really isn't the full story, is it?
No. It does appear as though there's very much a two-tier market in New Zealand at the moment. Auckland seems to be going through its period of adjustment, but the rest of New Zealand, by and large, still seems to be in a relatively strong position from what I can see. And that seems to be perhaps for a number of reasons. I think that the rural economy in particular is continuing to progress very strongly, and tourism, of course, is continuing to grow, really. And if anything, what we're struggling with at the moment is a lot of the growth pains of tourism. Certainly in the area that I come from, the central South Island called Central Otago, we live in a town called Cromwell, which is only 40 minutes from Queenstown. And the level of growth in tourism numbers through that region seems to be, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but certainly anecdotally is very strong. The growth through the airport is continuing to grow in a very rapid way. But also there's a lot of camper vanners coming. They seem to fly into Christchurch and then migrate through the Mackenzie country and down through to Queenstown, Central Otago, and anecdotally, talking to people who run B&Bs and accommodation areas, the growth is really quite significant.
So let me just get that clear. So what we're saying is there is demand for property from temporary accommodation.
Yes.
Is that right? So
Absolutely.
It's like Airbnb
Yes.
and bed and breakfast and short-term stays and those sorts of things.
Yes.
So that's one of the factors that's really driving the
Absolutely.
demand. Okay.
Yeah, and what that also seems to be doing is then taking properties out of the long-term rental market.
Right.
And added to that, of course, is the fact that KiwiSaver in New Zealand at the moment has reached a level where many people have had their funds invested for up to 3 to 4 years, and so there seems to be a significant rate of cash-in of that. And so I was talking with an agent just recently in the southern part of the South Island in Invercargill, and he said that the three key areas that he sees as increasing demand for rentals and therefore prices were the issue of the KiwiSaver conversions and the Airbnb. A number of places have been taken out of the market, and simply just growth of people shifting into the area. Whether that's from out of the North Island or from still some from Christchurch, or certainly a lot of immigration as well. And so there's all these factors that seem to be combining, and rentals are extremely hard to find, values are going up, and sale prices are going up.
And I suppose if you look back historically, property prices in the South Islands have been relatively low for quite a long period of time. I think in Dunedin, for a long time, there was hardly any capital appreciation at all for years.
Probably
and years.
up to 1 or 2 decades.
Right.
Really from the mid-'80s, where there was a significant amount of restructuring under Rogernomics, etc., the rural economies took a real battering over that time, and it's taken a long time for that to come about, partially through increasing commodity prices, but I think also local communities have also restructured themselves. They've had to say, look, we're no longer just a sheep and beef servicing area, so they have looked into areas of tourism. They've expanded certainly in Central Otago into areas of viticulture and significant growth in horticulture. And so there's a multifaceted economy where once upon a time it was very one-dimensional. Now it seems to be 3 or 4-dimensional.
Right, okay. So a bit more economic momentum, population growth,
Yes.
low prices to start. What
Yes.
about the supply of land? What's that like in the South Island?
Well, in the Central Otago region and Queenstown are really quite tight. And certainly any pricing starts to be really quite expensive. I don't think that you would buy a section in Wanaka now for under 400,000, which is probably double what it was, say, 4 years ago. Cromwell, you could have picked one up for 100,000 5 years ago. They're now 250 to 300. So that seems to be quite a common trend that's going through. There is land there. It's costly to get it subdivided. By developers always want their margin, etc. And so, that's certainly a significant factor. And I think also the fact that we're coming off a relatively low base. There's only 30,000 people live in the Queenstown Basin. There's perhaps another 8 to 10,000 at Wanaka, another 6 to 8 around Cromwell. It doesn't take many people coming into the area to make a significant lift on a percentage terms, and that's certainly what we see happening.
And do you see people who've given up on Auckland because it's too expensive and are looking further south? Is that
definitely?
Yeah,
definitely.
Right.
And whether we see them definitely coming directly from Auckland, or perhaps Auckland to Hamilton, someone from Hamilton shifts further south, someone from there shifts further south, it's a flow-on effect without a doubt. And even into places such as Invercargill and even Gore. A small town that we've got quite a bit of property investment in. We do see a lot of people coming from further afield, and simply because the pricing is affordable. They can still purchase a reasonable 2 to 3 bedroom house for mid $200s, perhaps up to $300,000, and they're saving $100,000 or $200,000. If they're near retirement, they put it in their pocket, and they've got a sustainable, viable future.
So what does that mean for the local residents in the area, young people who've grown up in the South Island, and are they now getting priced out of the market?
I don't know that they are, because certainly in the very in the smaller centres, such as your Gores, your Balcluthers, your Miltons, those sorts of places, it is still quite affordable. And to cash in your KiwiSaver does still allow people to get into the market at a reasonable level. I think it's certainly different in Central Otago. I think that the young people definitely are. You could hardly buy a house in Cromwell now for $500,000. Alexandra, $400,000. Well, those figures are about double what they were 4 years ago. So it's a quantum shift. And so young people are either having to start off flatting or find some other way of getting into that first house. It is certainly a lot different to what it was a very short time ago.
So does that mean that most of the people who are buying the property, particularly the new ones being built, are investors coming in, or people looking at it as effectively a future investment rather than actually for somewhere to live?
No, it does seem as though there are still people wanting to come into the area and buy and live. Okay. No doubt there are investors as well. But it just seems as though as some people with perhaps a bit more money, whether they've come from Auckland or Queenstown or other places, come in, that it isn't just that they're coming in saying we're going to be investors and we're not going to be living here and there's going to be all these absentee landlords. I don't think we're seeing a massive amount of that. I think that there are genuine people coming in because the jobs are there. There's undoubtedly jobs there, but it does make it harder for the younger people.
So let's switch the topic a little bit and talk about the current state of the New Zealand economy, and specifically the Reserve Bank of New Zealand governor, basically in their rate decision, no change today, said we think the next rate's going to go down, right? And that seems to be having quite an interesting impact on mortgage rates at the moment, which seem quite low. Yes,
I think they're very low, extremely low. In fact, historically, so I think that today the Kiwi Bank has dropped its 5-year rate to 4.29, which I think is the lowest ever that's been advertised, certainly in the last 30 or 40 years. So I'm a little bit surprised by it, and perhaps that's because we don't see the downward trend in prices that perhaps Auckland is seeing. And certainly in terms of business confidence surveys, they don't come out very positively. Now, it's hard to know whether that is actual or whether that's business people making a statement against the Labour government, and I'm really not too sure. But it does appear as though perhaps retail figures and spending has been back a little. So the Reserve Bank is taking a fairly conservative stance and saying we feel as though the economy needs some more life in it, a little bit more of an injection. So I'm interested because it's not as though it's difficult from a property perspective, investor's perspective. It's not hard to find somebody who wants to rent your property. It's not as though we're seeing crashing values, certainly not in the South Island anyway. And yet you can borrow money at 4%. It does seem to be a little bit of an anomaly, but hey, while it's there, then people in property will be happy about it.
And of course, the international markets are also moving down as well. So effectively, funding costs for the banks are a little bit better than they were a few months ago.
Yes, they are.
And it seems to me as though the banks are very, very keen to lend at the moment.
Yes.
There's a lot of advertising, I think, and trying to persuade people to come into the market. So
Yes.
all of those forces are trying to support the market going into the future.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. Of course, the banks aren't making it incredibly easy. It's one thing to say we've got a lot of money to lend, but it's another thing for them to explain what those terms are upon which they will lend. And I guess that's probably fair enough, that they are being, again, conservative. They don't want to just see some kind of artificial bubble created and values going out of sync. And I think perhaps over the last 3 to 4 years, with the LVR ratios having been set firstly at 40% for investors and dropping down to 35%, that's certainly helped, I think, take some of the heat out of the market. But in large parts of the country still, that hasn't translated into a reduction in pricing.
Yeah, no, we certainly see Auckland going one way, but many of the other centres going up further.
Seems that way, yes.
And last November, there were changes to how foreign investors could invest in New Zealand. Yeah. Has that had any impact locally?
Well, it's hard to know, just anecdotally. I don't know that Queenstown too much has dropped back, and that's probably the place where most foreign investors would be investing in New Zealand, in the South Island. But again, quite a large percentage of the property turnover is in the way of new builds, sections, new subdivisions, etc. And they aren't precluded from being able to build. In fact, they're encouraged to build. So anecdotally, it doesn't appear as though that's had a huge effect on Queenstown, but perhaps it's going to take another 2 to 3 months before we see that following through.
Okay. And you've had a portfolio of residential properties over the years, most of them rented out. You've also been involved in the commercial lending, including in Christchurch. But what are the lessons that you've learned from the journey of being a property investor and a property manager?
Well, I guess one of the key ones that you often get reminded of is debt can be your enemy very quickly, and try and be conservative where possible in the use of debt. And if you feel as though you aren't able to sustain a significant downturn over a reasonable period of time, if you do your sums and you know that that's going to hurt you badly, or put you in a place where the bank's going to be nervous with you, then just don't get in that position, because it's not worth it. So certainly, debt, the judicious use of debt is obviously, I think, generally a good thing. And that really comes down to someone's degree of comfort. We all know about risk profiles for individuals, etc. But from my experience, it's about, can you sleep at night? and if you can't, then I think you need to be seriously looking at whether you're at the right level of debt. And of course, take good advice. Listen, go and ask for good advice, and then be prepared to accept it, not just move on. Banks can be your friends in good times, but without being too critical. When they get their directives from on high, things can turn very, very quickly, and you can go from one extreme to another. And you want to be able to ride out those tough times rather than be a victim of them.
So it sounds like be positive, but also think about what could go wrong.
Absolutely.
And be conservative. Yeah.
Yes. And it's about knowing your market. I think it's true of any form of investment. Diversification's great, but if you're really used to investing in residential, and perhaps it isn't the wisest thing to take a large leap into commercial, and vice versa. So I think it's about understanding the market that you're in, and doing your homework, ask lots of questions, and then perhaps put your toe in the water first before you perhaps take the next step.
And do you think it's important to spread the risks in terms of different geographies and different types of property, or is it better to concentrate and focus on a particular area, on a particular type of business?
Well, again, I think that perhaps depends on the individual or the corporation that's looking at it. There can be a place for that, but sometimes people become highly specialised and they really understand a market. And it may just be that they're better to stay with that, because if they don't understand another part of the market and invest significantly in it, if there's some quirk about that catches them out, then they could suffer from that. But I've got a spread of residential and industrial and in different locations, but I do find that those that are perhaps closest to me, I understand the best and can generally be most aware of opportunities when they come up and have the greater potential to do the best in. But I don't think there's any one rule, but it depends on the individual.
Okay. And then my last question, Paul, is I always ask this of people who come on the show. What do you think home prices are going to do in the South Island of New Zealand over the next 1 to 2 years? Do you think they're going to go up, going to go down, stay the same? Or
Well, I think, again, even in the South Island, there appears to be a bit of a two-tiered market. Christchurch would appear to be flat to dropping. And I think that's for the primary reason that there was a massive amount of subdivisible land made available post-earthquake. And Christchurch has also always been one of the cheaper places in New Zealand in which to build. And so with that readily available land, a lot of additional building went on. And so that seems to have flattened demand out overall and flattened prices. So I don't know that we're going to see too much more in the way of significant growth in Christchurch. There's lots of flat land, lots of available housing. Central Otago and Queenstown, I think I'm fairly certain that in the medium to long term we're going to continue to see growth. Again, so much of it's because we're off such a low base of population. There is relative scarcity of land and there's significant demand, not just for tourism, but horticulture, viticulture and all those other things that spin off, as well as education, significant growth in education and polytechs, etc. And then it does appear as though there is a significant demand for labour throughout the rest of the South Island. And not just because of agriculture and horticulture, but because of just growth and the need for infrastructure. I know that in Dunedin, for example, there is significant investment from the university about to take place, and a new hospital, $1.2 billion hospital, which they say is going to absorb, I think it was between 500 and 1,000 workers over 5 years. So you get those sorts of numbers off an already well-utilised labour market, and it's extremely difficult to see how demand can't continue to grow for property as well.
So I guess to sum up, New Zealand is not Auckland, right?
No, that's
New Zealand
true.
is a much larger country, much more diverse, and the South Island sounds pretty interesting.
Yes, it is, and I think it has does have a very big future. And of course, one of the other things is too that increasingly people don't need to live in the large cities with the whole digital world. So people are saying, what's a really nice place to live? And many of them would see that as being the South Island, and they say, well, we can make my job fit around that.
Great part of the world. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Martin.
Thank you. So there you have it. Very interesting perspective from Paul. And as I say, New Zealand is not Auckland. Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Talk to you next time.